Hello out there. This is Wise Women, and today you're spending time with women inspiring spiritual excellence. I'm La Cherie.
I'm Agnes.
And I'm Treve.
We are a group of women who love God and we love His people, and we just want to share Him with you. Hello out there, and welcome to Wise Women. We're so glad you're able to join us on today. We're still in our second season, soul searching, but our topic today is unforgiveness. And so we're going to talk about how we've dealt with it, how we've experienced it, and then hopefully can give you some applications on how to handle it when it comes your way, because it's one of those things that you can't avoid it. And so, Pastor Jay, would you like to start in sharing a moment?
Well, this is one of my favorite topics as I said on the last week. And thanks again for having me here with you guys. This is just my second experience with Wise Women, and it's just been a treat. But unforgiveness or forgiveness, whichever way you want to put it, is really, I think, such a challenging area to deal with, because there have been some grievous things done to us that really people with our natural senses don't deserve to be forgiven. It's one thing where someone, takes your seat or cuts you off on the freeway, and that level of forgiveness. But then there are some grievous things. There's rape, there's incest, there's abuse. There's some very serious things that have happened to us. We have been violated. Just all kinds of ungodly things have been done to us. And still the Bible gives us the command to forgive. And so we look at that and say, so this is challenging. And one of the most, I think the biggest wall that comes up when you start dealing with forgiveness is that people will come back and say, as I've said myself, but you don't know what they did to me, right? Mm-hmm. You don't understand what I've been through. Mm-hmm. And so that becomes a big wall to forgiveness. But as we started talking about before, we have to understand that forgiveness is a choice. It is our choice to forgive. We can choose to forgive, or we can choose to hold on to it and keep it. But as long as you are holding on to it, it has not been released to God to deal with. Mm-hmm. And you wonder why your enemy is prospering. It's because you got him in your heart, mm-hmm. and God has not been able to touch him. I've seen this analogy that says that unforgiveness is like you drinking rat poison and expecting the other person to die, because it's just poisoning you. It's poisoning you. As I said in the last episode, that in Matthew 18, it makes it clear that the response to unforgiveness is tormenting. And I can remember when I just was the most unforgiving person. I just did not forgive. I held on. And I can tell you, for years, I couldn't sleep. I'd be up at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, crying, going back, revisiting. How dare you do this? Who do you think you are? You know who I am? All of it. My whole narrative, tormented. And then have to work the next day, raising 2 kids, tormented. Because of unforgiveness, I was very guarded, not open when it came to love. Wanted to love but couldn't, wanting to give but couldn't give because I'd been hurt so deeply. And once I finally got the tools for forgiveness, it was so freeing. Mm-hmm. It opened up another level of life for me. I realized I had this one instance that I'm going to just give a little bit of the story, but I was out to dinner one night, my husband and I, and another couple, the elder and his wife, and we were just having a great time. And then he says to me, "Oh, Jay, I work with somebody you know." And I said, "Really?" And so he began to describe her and said, "Yeah, she's a twin. He's going on." And then it dawned on me who he was talking about. And I said, "Oh, no, Oh, no, she's not a friend of mine. He said, oh, he said, you're right. He said, she told me she was a friend of your roommate. She knew your roommate. She wasn't really friends with you. Well, my roommate was my ex-husband, and this was his girl.
Oh, oh.
And that restaurant, as far as everybody else, will always remember me because I went berserk. Wow. I had been divorced for years, very happily married, hadn't seen this woman in, 15 years, didn't never think about her. But I mean, I went in. And I could just hear like somebody a long way away saying, Jay, does it really matter? Does it matter? And I'm like going in. I mean, yelling. I'm going in because I still had never forgiven her. I felt the exact same way. And I mean, I was going in. And so we got home. And of course, I was not even released. My husband was like, you go to sleep downstairs. He was like,
Don't bring that up here.
I don't even. He was just over the top, right? And I got on my knees and I began to say, God, it took me exactly all night. It was the sun was coming up before I could forgive, and I just was first. And every time I would say I choose to forgive, but God, you know what she did. I just was. I mean, she had done some grievous things, right? But by the sunrise, I just kept saying I choose, and I finally got to the place of forgiveness and began to pray for her and bless her. And the Lord began to show me, look, you've been standing at the altar every Sunday with your arms out talking about come, ready to pray for somebody.
Wow.
What if she had came?
Wow.
And he showed me that unforgiveness had came to the place where I hated her. I had went from unforgiveness to bitterness to resentment, and I literally hated her. And he had to take all of that apart. And he was like, what would you have done? What were you going to start going off on her at the What were you
You can't come up here.
What would you have done? But we walk with this level all the time. I'm gonna go. Let's what else?
I love you mentioned Matthew 18. My favorite Matthew 18 story is Abraham had got in trouble for something, and I told him he couldn't go to the fall festival. And he's like, Mom, you ever read the Bible? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, you've read that part about forgiveness? And I'm like, yeah, what about it? And he goes, well, it says you have to forgive me 7 times 7 to infinity. I'm like, well, actually, that's wrong. It says 7 times 70, which is 490. And he goes, well, you haven't forgiven me to that number either. And so I was like, okay. But here's the thing about it. When it comes to forgiveness, it's easier to forgive someone that's not in your inner circle. It's easier to forgive someone that's not close to you, someone you're not going to see very often, someone that's not intimately aware of who you are and how to hurt you. Because those people know that what it takes to push your buttons. They know what it takes, how to make you come outside of yourself and be someone different. And that little child of mine who's now 14 and still special, but he helps me to be a better person because I can see, you're right. And then when I come on upon an adult, I remember 490 to infinity. I have to forgive this person. And I think in my nature, I don't hold grudges. And so that kind of helps. But then, again, it's usually when it's someone close to you, someone that you've had an intimate relationship, or someone who's, wronged you in an intimate way. Those are the ones that are hard to overcome because, you can't just wash that away. Those emotions are there. Those feelings are there. Those thoughts, they cut you very deeply. But again, we have Jesus as our example. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Those people haven't killed us. They haven't put us on the cross to die a slow death. They have done things that are hurtful, but they haven't gotten to that point yet. And if he can forgive,
That's it.
then so can we. Is it easy to do? Absolutely not. But like you may have to tarry from sundown to sun up to get to that place. But prayerfully God will allow us to get to those places of forgiveness. And the thing is, a lot of times for me, the people that are still holding their ought against me, I've already forgiven them. They just don't know it, but I'm good. And even when I see them, hey, I'm good. Now I ain't going to hug you because I don't need them spirits jumping on me. And then I got to go and, pray over myself and my clothes and everything else. I'm going to need you to stay, give me that 6 feet of distance. But I still am able to, interact with that person. And, you know, they're still waging wars that I'm not a participant in, because I've allowed, God to continue to work on me. And it's a daily prayer. I have to still, pray daily for some people, so that my forgiveness stays. I don't want to slip back. I don't want to forgive you for 3 months and then I run into you and now I'm in unforgiveness for
Yeah.
9,
Wow.
for another season. Exactly.
Wow. There's so many things. I don't know what to bring up first. Okay. The thing that helped me with forgiveness was actually a movie. When I saw The Shack, I don't know if either of you have seen The Shack.
Saw the Shack, read the book.
I read the book. I didn't see the movie.
The movie, I never read the book, but I saw the movie, and the thing that got me was, I think that's when I started the whole considering what others are going through thing, because I was right there with the dad. Like, how can you how can you love this person and forgive what this person has done?
Right.
That, they say no sin is greater than another. Sin is sin. And it's rooted in, evil and hatred and all these things. But how can you forgive this person who took a life away? And the fact that, God said, this is still my child, just like you are my child. That's where it all started for me. It just put things into perspective for me. Once again, not just, I used to have a hard time praying for myself, but when it comes to things like forgiveness and hurt and all of that, I did used to only think of myself. And so even like, for example, with my mother, I wasn't there for her childhood, but I did witness some things that I got the opportunity to witness some things that she went through when I was a child because my grandparents raised me. So, and I got the better of what happened because my grandfather used to beat my grandmother whenever they were children. And because they raised me, I saw most of the threats for physical abuse and the verbal abuse. I did witness those types of things. So in perspective now, I'm like, okay, you went through this as a child. I saw some of that. I didn't see the worst parts of it, but in trying to understand the person that you were then and the person that you are now, I can take into consideration these things. And I know there are people out there that are like, I don't care what you've been through. You did me wrong.
Right.
And that's what it is. I don't want to hear
you.
Yeah, I don't want to hear what you got going on or what happened to you. But it's funny, those same people want to be heard though, and they want attention, but they don't want to reciprocate. So I think that's where for me now I'm like, okay, God, even though sometimes I have to ask him for help, I know you love all your children. Help me to love this person because they are just wrong. They're wrong. And it also took me to go through an experience that I won't share the details of it on here, but it wasn't really one of forgiveness. It was in my journey of trying to make sure that I'm living right and doing all that I need to do, the smaller things. Because sometimes we feel like, well, I didn't murder anybody or I didn't kill anybody. I didn't steal anything, so I'm good. But it's the little things, the thoughts, the attitude, the tone that still is sin. because it's a demonstration of what is lying inside of our hearts.
Right.
And in a sense, I think I don't even know what I was being. I know I was being wrong. I don't know if I should call it prideful. I don't know what I should call it, but I felt like this is actually a double sin because we did it together. But it's more so like we don't feel like it was something we had to do that we didn't feel like we had to do it because it was wrong. So it wasn't necessarily, so it was something we had to pay for, but we didn't want to pay because it was wrong. And we knew it was wrong, but instead of just doing what we needed to do, we just refused to pay. And so we ended up like being given an ultimatum. We almost lost the house and almost went into foreclosure. And it was just like, in me praying, like, God, please help us get out of this situation. Instead of, leaving that prayer feeling like God's got us, God had to show me that, well, no, you got yourself in this situation. You have the ability to get yourself out, but you got yourself in the situation. So why are you praying to me?
Wow.
And so a lot of things sort of like that have happened to where I'm like, okay, it's things that are on the inside of me. Some things I put myself in some of the battles that I'm in. That it would just cause me to have a perspective change on people. So when it comes to forgiveness, I could be more considerate now. And I think the thing that I was having a conversation with somebody before about this is, and I know people may have different beliefs about it, but they say forgive and forget. Or they say you can forgive, but you don't have to forget. And God doesn't do that to us. He, tosses our sin away. But the conversation I was having with that person, I realized it goes back to the whole trauma thing, because when we were talking about how that person was saying, well, I forgave this person, but why it just seems like this issue keeps coming up. But I forgave that person. But now I'm having dreams about me, being with that person. They're asking me, why are you upset? Like, I'm having dreams about the same things happen, but I forgave that person. But every time I get in this situation, I'm still. And so the question was, did I truly forgive that person, or is it just what they did? So I guess my question is, can you separate?
That's interesting.
Or do we separate the action from the person? Like, I'm good with this person, but the action is still causing me trauma and causing me, like, it's controlling my decision making, it's controlling who I hang around and the things that I do, the things that I say. Or is it all lumped together in one? This person did this. Because I think the person may or may not have been associated with what happened, but it's just the thing that happened that is causing the trauma and the drama.
Pastor Jay said earlier that it boils down to choice. And so I think even in this scenario, it still boils down to you have a choice.
Right.
And you can get all philosophical and get all scholarly and say, well, there's the person and there's the issue that the person did. Or you can just say, I choose to holistically forgive the person, the deed, the look on their face, and they was all stank when they did it. I forgive it all. Because this is where I like to do, this is my forgiveness story. If you were to die today, ma'am, and you go to heaven, God is not going to say, well, Treve, you acted like a donkey because that person did this to you. No, we're not talking about that person. We're talking about you and what you did and what you did not do. And so what you chose not to do in your last 2 hours on earth, you chose not to forgive. And so regardless of what they did to you, how did you respond to them? You're only responsible for you.
That's right.
I can't control what somebody else does. I may not like what they do to me. I may not feel well because of what they're doing to me, but I'm responsible and I have a choice on how I respond to them and the thing, the issue, the situation, the circumstance. I'm only responsible for me. So when I go to bed at night, I sleep well because whatever happened that day, Lord, thank you for letting me get through that. That was a horrible situation. I had to play my praise song that got me through it again and again. But Lord, I thank you that I got through it. And now let me have one of my fun dreams that you can only give me because I'm sleeping stress free because I have forgiven them. I'm not holding on to it. I'm not mulling it over in my head as I fall asleep that I'm staying awake because of it. I'm good. Because if the Lord decides to take me in my sleep, guess what? He took me in a good place. Not holding on to the unforgiveness, not holding on to the issue, not holding on to the situation. I'm good. Now, maybe around 12 o'clock, I was having a moment. But by 12:03, I was good. So, Lord, thank you for those 3 minutes of grace. By 12:03, I was good.
One thing we don't we don't look at is that same scripture in Matthew 18 when he begins to address him. He said, "Oh, you wicked servant," and that wicked really means sinful. You sinful servant. You are not going to be released to the tormentors. So not only is the punishment tormenting, in God's eyes, unforgiveness is sin. And so we think, I just don't forgive, but in his eyes, it's sin. It's sin. It's sin. And so we have got to really look at it as that. We got to look at it in the black and the white. Now, I agree with this. There's a scripture that says that God throws your sins in the seas of forgetfulness, never to remember anymore. I don't believe in that saying that if you forgive, you forget. I don't believe that you forget the details. I don't believe that you forget the stories, and I don't believe that that there aren't repercussions to error, to sin, to what someone has done. But it's not up to you to bring the vengeance upon them, right? And so in that vein, as I said earlier, you will forget the pain, though. You remember the details, but you forget the pain that goes along with it. You forget the humiliation. I went for years without telling anybody my testimony because I was too ashamed and embarrassed by it. And it wasn't until I went through forgiveness, went through inner healing, and was able to forgive to get to the point where now I can share. I had a young lady, I was in a play with Dietrich Haddon. As a matter of fact, was with the play. I was still in Michigan at the time. And this young lady was in the car with me because in my mind, what I went through, God made it up for me. It was that bad. God made this up. Nobody been through this before. And this young lady's in the car, and she begins, I don't even know how we got to talking about it, but she began to give me her testimony. I had been giving her a ride for a while, never ministered to her. She was going through my life, right? But I had all this valuable information, all this valuable testimony of what God can do, how he can hold you, what he can do that I couldn't share because I was still stuck at ashamed and humiliated by something that happened to me. Thank God for forgiveness so I could come forth and let somebody know that God can hold you regardless of what you've been through, no matter where you are. So it is in spiritual warfare, we call unforgiveness the general. It's the main key. It is, and it leaves a complete opening for the enemy to come in and do what he wants. All he looks for is openings, right? That is an opening that he can get in and manipulate and use against you over and over again. And so when we really look at the big scope of it, and we understand the seriousness, it's sin. I'm wicked. I'm tormented. And all I have to do is choose to let it go. It's over anyway. and we are also standing in the way. It's me, it's God is over here talking about if you just let him go, I'll get him. If you just let him go. But you're holding on.
Yeah.
And once you release him to a just God that knows how to deal with the pain and whatever they've inflicted on you. We trust him with it. So, Father, I forgive them, the act and the person, all in one.
And by not forgetting, it allows two things to happen. One, you're not so easily fallen by that again. But also not forgetting, it allows you to share your testimony
Testimony.
and let someone know if God did it for me, he'll do it for you. Let me tell you what I went through. You this and this and this and this and this. And I forgave him because I knew God was in control, and I knew that whatever I could plot, and trust me, I can come up with some doozies. We thank God for deliverance. God could do so much more, and he would get the glory out of it. Because if I did it myself, then I might get, a jail sentence. So we don't want that. We want God to handle it, but then we can share those stories with someone else so that they can be encouraged, so they can be inspired, so they can see the rainbow that God has for us, that he has these promises that I'm going to see you through. And I'm there for you. And you're not alone. Because a lot of times people feel that they're alone. They're the only one that's ever gone through this. Nobody's ever been through what I've been through.
He made it up.
And here it is. The person sitting next to you is going through what you've been through.
Yeah.
And so now, because you haven't forgotten, but you can tell this, you can tell it in such a way that they can see that the emotion is gone. They can see that you really have moved past it, and it gives them hope.
Yeah.
So many people are hopeless. They live in this hopeless state of mind because they can't get past the trauma of the incident to even forgive. They can't get past it. But if they can see you and they think you got it all put together. Ooh, I love Treve. She's so young. She does this. She can sing. She can write. Oh my gosh, she's got it all put together. And then when you tell them, oh, trust me, I come from a place of emotional abuse. I come from a place of feeling abandoned or rejected. So yeah, I may be all put together, but that's because God put these pieces together. He created this. He has made me his masterpiece so that now I can share with you how I came over. We overcome by the words of our testimony.
I was just thinking the same thing.
And the blood of the Lamb. So yeah, his blood, but it's those words of our testimony. Pastor Jay, she got all put together, but then when she starts sharing her story, you realize, wow, this woman of God has gone through something that a lesser person would not be able to stand in the pulpit and share the words of God with somebody else. But God has brought her through it so that she can help someone else get through it. So we can't forget, because if we forget what God has done for us, then what's a testimony?
Right. It is our testimony. That's what you're,
Right.
that is it. That is our testimony.
Amen. So I would say, what can we say to people to help them to get to a place where they can forgive and let go of things? Because there are more simple, I don't want to say more simple. There are things, I guess, that, are seemingly easier to get over than other things.
What I would tell a person is give yourself time and give yourself grace, because there's no set time to get over being hurt. And in the midst of being hurt and disappointed and humiliated and embarrassed and struggling, give yourself grace in those moments that God is still with you, that God knew that day was going to come and that situation was going to come. And he put people in your life that you may have to lean on, and you may have to be honest with someone. You may have to tell somebody that humiliating story so that they can say, oh, well, guess what? God has done this for me. So give yourself grace. There's no set time. There's no, in my opinion, there's no cookie cutter moment that we're all, it's going to be the same for everybody. But trust the God that you serve. Trust the promises that you've read in his word. And know that when he says, I will never leave you nor forsake you, he means it.
I've done a lot with inner healing ministry. And one of the things that we like to do when you're dealing with forgiveness and this when you're dealing with situations is we first of all have to understand that God is he operates outside of time. He has nothing to do with time. Time in the beginning, that was when time began, right? God already existed. And so what is I find very important is to go back in time. God needs to many times he needs to heal you at the point where you were injured. And so because he is not limited to time, you don't have to do it sitting here at 15, at 40 and it happened at 15. You can allow God to take you back to 12. Go back through that instance, see that person, be right back at that room. And then you have to then apply that scripture that you just said that he will never leave you or forsake you and begin to see that he was there with you all the time.
Amen.
And see him in that situation. And then you begin to go to him. He is our safe place. In that situation, he's our safe place. And you can forgive him at the point of the injury. You begin to go back there and say, look, this hurt me very deeply. You tried to destroy me, but I choose to forgive you. I choose to forgive you, and just begin to do it. And you can do it over and over again, but you have that ability to go through time and begin to do it at that point, where it happened. It is such a freeing situation once you really grab a hold to the power of forgiveness. And just as she said that everyone has a different experience. My experience may not be your experience. Your experience may be different. God may hit you over it may come through a movie. You listen to someone talking and it hits you. But when God shows you, and sometimes like I didn't even know I hadn't forgiven this woman. I didn't even think about her. The last time I thought about her, I'm living life. I'm going up. And I never had to encounter her. But the name, the instance, because she used to say that my husband and I were just roommates. Yeah, right. That's how we got 2 kids. But anyway, so just those trigger words brought everything back wide open, right? And so, but God is such a merciful God. Thank God He didn't take me while I was still filled with hate and bitterness and resentment and unforgiveness, wickedness. It's sad.
Wow. I think one of the key things that you said is that you didn't know that you were still holding on to that and harboring that. And I just thank God that for a lot of the things or a lot of the things that I've been holding on to and that I've dealt with, I did not know that I was still holding on to those things. And that I was essentially letting them control my decision making and some of the places I won't go, and some of the people that I won't hang around. And that just comes from not letting go, but holding on to it, even though we pushed it down so we think we're good. Or we think that we've forgotten, but it's still there in the back of our minds. I think that I agree that forgiveness is liberating. One of the things that I had to do recently was forgive someone who's already dead, who's already passed away. And when I think about it now, it's just like that person is dead and gone, buried in the ground, and what they did is still with me, even though they're gone. And it's just like, dang, Trevay, that makes no sense. That person literally is not worried about you because they're gone. They're not holding on to what they did, but you're still holding on to it. And the thing is, at the time before they died, a friend told me, said, go to the hospital, be there with them, pray for them, and tell them that you forgive them. And because it was tucked away, it's like, I don't have anything to forgive them for. Why would you say that? I'm good. There's nothing for me to forgive them for. That was in 2018. And now 2022 is when I remembered what they did.
Wow.
And I think it took for me to have a conversation with somebody, which thank God, because when we ask him to help us, when we like really are intentional about living right and being better, he will put us in situations and in conversations where we have the opportunity to figure out what it is that's holding us back and causing us to not be effective or to get better and to grow. And in the conversation, the person was talking about how the person they did not forgive was dead already. They had already passed away years ago. And it's just them saying that I just started just remembering things that happened. It's like, wow, why did I not think of this at the time that my friend told me to go and say that I forgive that person? Now I'm just like, wow, like, Lord, I let go of this. I forgive them. I don't want to hang on to it anymore. I had to sit there and think about everything that happened and let it go. It had to be brought up. So I thank God for that. But I mean, I know that there are people who, I guess, in a sense, feel like because the person died, that is the forgiveness, and it's not.
It's not.
They think that everything is good because that person is out of their life. They don't have to see them, don't have to hear them, don't have to worry about them. And then there are people who may feel like they have lost their opportunity to forgive that person because they're gone. And you have not lost that opportunity. You still can forgive and move on, and continue on with your walk and to grow and to get better. Speaking of tragic things that happen, such as death and sickness and illness and things like that, one thing that I did go through when a family member passed away was some people in my family blaming God and being upset with God. And I think that I can say that for some of them, they're not in a place yet where they have forgiven God. Because that happened, they are at odds. They have an odd with God. And I know, you see on TV and you see in real life that there are people who blame God for things that happen. And they say, if you're God, how could you let something like this happen to me or to my family member or to, and I have found it difficult to find the right words to say to that person, to help them to hold on to their faith and to continue to believe God. And I think that it really is it's just really coming from a place of hurt, irregardless of everything that God has done up until this point. This one bad, tragic thing happens and you just want to have nothing to do with him, essentially treating him like us, like another human would do something and you cut them off, treating God the same way. So I'm asking you both, what is something that you would say to someone that's in that position or in a place where they feel like, they're upset with God?
Pastor Jay, please go. I have the hiccups.
Well, you know what? I find two situations in forgiveness when you're forgiving that becomes very difficult or challenging to forgive, and that is yourself and God. And those are the two that we really don't deal with. We'll deal with choosing to choose to feel other people, but we holding all kind of stuff over ourselves and over our God. You got to forgive God the same way, because one thing I say this very sensitively because sometimes some people find it dishonorable, but the reality is, yes, we do get angry with God. We do, and we do hold things against him. He's big enough; he can accept it. You can play the old holier than thou card if you want, but he knows your heart. He knows, he sees it. So you can try to act like, God, I don't question you. Yes, you do. While you saying it,
In
you
saying it, you're
Yeah.
questioning him.
I'm not questioning. Yes, you do. And so instead of the religious rhetoric that we have learned,
Yeah.
just be open and transparent. God, I am angry with you. You have got to help me understand. I choose. You got to choose to forgive him, just like you choose to forgive that
Everybody
person
else,
and that
yeah.
person. And really, sometimes you have to do that, and then you have to also do it with yourself.
Yeah.
I knew that in my situation, one of the biggest things where I took up so much more than I ever would have taken was because I absolutely knew God said, don't marry him. And I did it anyway, right? And so it was like, in my head, you make your bed hard, you got to sleep there, baby, right? So, and so I needed to forgive myself for a lot of the things I did. And so that was just as difficult for me to forgive myself and then to forgive God, because he really didn't have to let me go through all this. You know, we had a tragedy in our family. We lost our granddaughter, our first granddaughter, at the age of 6 in a car accident by a drunk driver. Okay. And so it was like, okay, God, really, this is a lot. Now, this is a lot, right? And so, but the challenge became, we got to forgive him. We got to forgive him. And as it was his choice, she had no choice. Snatched all of our choices, but we still had to get, and the Lord blessed, we were able to stand in the courtroom and tell the boy, you going to jail for 25 years, you deserve it for the crime you committed. But as far as my family and us, we forgive you. So you can go there, do your due, but you gonna do your time now.
Yeah.
We expect you to do your time, but we forgive you. And there was another family that was involved, and they did the same thing. They forgave him. It was really a powerful piece, I'm sure, for the judge, the lawyers, for everybody else in there to hear these family members who have lost their loved ones, children. They were children, but to forgive. And then I had to go home and forgive God and just really go through a whole litany with him, because it didn't have to happen. But God, I choose to forgive you. I just choose to forgive you for this. And the Lord asked me a question. He said, would you have rather not had her at all? Or do you appreciate the time that you have? And I said, God, you know what? If I had to do it again, I do. I appreciate the 6 years you gave us, right? And so, yes, it is a reality that we are angry with God, and we have to face it, that we do have an ought against him. He knows it anyway, so you can fake it if you want, but admit it,
Yeah.
and then go through the same process as you would with anyone else and choose to forgive him.
For me, I am so, I'm at a place where I can talk to God like I talk to you. And so, just like I would say, see, this don't make no sense. I would say, Lord, this don't make no sense. You're going to have to help me. You're going to have to help me, because I can't help myself. And in the midst of my unbelief, my belief, my doubts, my fears, my concerns, everything, I'm gonna need you. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go in here and sit down, Lord, because I and this is how some of the conversations go. They're just this
Exactly.
goofy, but it's like, because that's the only way I can get through. Because I can't move past this moment. So Lord, I'm gonna go sit down. I'm gonna let you do whatever you're gonna do. You're gonna have to, and when I sit down and get out my feelings, because I'm in my feelings, and I just sit there, can't talk to anybody. I just sit there, and then and it's always a God thing. Whenever I move from that moment and I walk through the living room, there's either some commercial and some word is said, or I sit down at my desk because I'm done and I got to do work, and somebody sent me some random message. But in that message, I can see that God is speaking to me. So he's helping me when I can't help myself. And I'm angry. And Lord, I'm telling you, I'm angry. And so I'm mad, and this is unfair. And I know you didn't say that life was fair, but I just want to say it so you can hear me say that it's not fair. Now help me get over it. Show me you in the midst of this. Because right now I can't see you, God. And I know you're here and you said you won't leave me. So right now I'm feeling a little bit alone and I need you to show up. And I'm not testing you, God. I'm just telling you that I don't have it in me. And when I'm honest like that, sometimes sometimes I think the Lord just makes me go to sleep because he knows that my little brain can't handle anymore. And I may text my boss, I need to take 15 minutes away from work because I have to get away from everything. And then I have to just let God be God. And I don't think I haven't had that personal thing where I had to say, God, I'm angry at you. But I've had those moments where I said, God, I can't see you. I can't feel you. I can't hear you. I feel like this moment, this situation, I'm by myself. I can't depend on anybody else because now I'm giving them credit that I have to give you. So I need you to show up.
Wow.
I need you to show up. So I'm going to go in here and I'm not having a pity party, but I'm going to go take a nap because I need a reset. Because if I keep moving around, I'm going to be moving in my own strength. And it's going to be my will and not your will that's going to be done. So I'm just going to let you be God. I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to go sit down. And if I sit there and something happen, and if I sit there and nothing happen, I'm just going to go sit. I got to time out. I time out myself because I also know me.
Yeah.
And me, y'all remember that me that I've been delivered from? I need to stay delivered from her. And so I have to just go sit still and let God be God. And because for me, it's those moments where I feel alone. I know I'm not alone, but I can't see you in the midst of this situation. And I know you're going to get the glory. And I'll be like, girl, guess what God did? But right now, the enemy is showing up way bigger. So I'm just going to sit down and let you show up. Because literally just happened just now. And all I could do is say, sigh, comma, I'm not surprised. And now God's got to do what he's going to do because whatever, it's beyond my control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I put the phone down and I'm going to let God do what he's going to do because it's going to be amazing. Because he always does amazing, wonderful, fantastic things when I take my hands off of it and say, I don't know what else to do, God, but give it to you. So here's my posture. My hands are open. I'm going to leave them open because I don't want to hold on to whatever it is. I'm letting it go. You do you.
As you know, there was a time where I went through, whenever I got in the car accident, I struggled so much because I just did not understand why. In my words were, I didn't understand why God allowed that to happen to me. And it's like even to think about the whole situation and just even how it happened. Like I'm sitting there at the stoplight and just all of a sudden someone just crashes into the back of my car. And going through just the experience again, because now I'll get testimony about that later. But because I can talk about it now. Physically how I felt just in the moment. Just having a migraine from a concussion, from feeling nauseous, to even the whole legal ordeal lasting so long, being drawn out, and it just seemed to do more hurt than harm going through the process, feeling physical pain, and then mentally just I feel like my life was interrupted. Like I couldn't do my job effectively. It's like in the moment I felt like I have not done anything wrong. I've been doing everything you've told me to do. I I felt like during that time I was drawing closer to God prior to the car accident. Like I was moving and growing in God. My relationship was better. I was perfecting my gift and being comfortable with that. And then this happens and it interrupted everything. And I didn't understand. I think that's where people say bad things happen to good people. Like I was feeling that for real. Like I don't do anything wrong. I do what I'm supposed to do. I'm obedient to the best of my ability. And then you allowed this to happen to me. I don't understand why. And even thinking back now, like the injuries that I had, I felt pain, but I did not feel what I had. I had 3 herniated discs in my back. I had torn cartilage. I had spinal fluid that was leaking. I had all of these things. I felt pain, but I did not. I did not feel that. Like when I went to the doctor, he told me that I need to be at home on bed rest, not going to work, and I still went to work. And mentally, it was so draining mentally. I was ready for everything to be over with. The recovery process was horrible. It was terrible. I feel like I questioned God the most that I ever have. I remember you giving me tough love and I hated it, but I needed it. And it could have been so much worse than what it was. Not even with what was said that I had going on, but just it could have been so much worse. And at the end of it all, I received the blessing. Of course, financially, I was blessed. It took me to the end of everything to look back on everything that had happened and just be like, wow, like God, you're good. I felt like my life was interrupted, but I felt like in that time I had to learn things that otherwise I wouldn't have learned. I had to learn to trust him a whole lot more than I'd ever had to trust him before. My faith was truly challenged. It took me I think going into deposition, my lawyer just telling me, Trevay, you're in the fight of your life and now you have to fight. Like him saying that was like, okay, this is the time where instead of sitting there like sulking and blaming God and asking him why, like this is a time where I should be giving him glory that it wasn't worse than what it was. And I should be praying and using what I know in order to give him glory in this situation. And also make sure that I get the victory out of this situation. It was, I guess, because there were so many things that happened prior to that. There was a death in my family, and then going into the new year, I expected, okay, this is a fresh start. You know, people make their New Year's resolutions, and that happened in January, the first month of the new year. And it's just like, I can't. I think prior to that, there were 3 deaths in my family, like month after month after month, and then that happened. And I think that it was difficult for me. I don't think I ever said, God, I'm angry with you and went through the whole I forgive you. It just took for me I just realized that God was good, even though bad things happen. He's still God and he's still good. And I had to realize that everything that does happen, both the good and the bad, all of it is working for our good. And that is what the word says. And he's going to use every opportunity to get the glory and to demonstrate that he's God and that he's good. And also that he loves us. And I had to see that in the situation in order to get to a point where I was not upset with him or angry with him.
So when I listened to both of your stories, I'll start with you, Trevay, since you just finished speaking. Yes, that was a horrible thing that happened to you. I remember talking to you afterwards and you were just traumatized. However, yes, you'd gone through some emotional things where you'd lost some loved ones, but also you were at a place where you were able to go out and run with your girls. At that time, you used to go out and run with your girls, the track girls. You were in peak physical condition. So when that accident happened, how you said you didn't feel some of the things that you should have felt, a lesser person would not have probably made it through that accident. But because you were physically fit, you had gone closer to God, you were working on all these different projects. And so you were pouring into his word so that you could pour it out into a different medium. You were close to God. So spiritually, you were in a better position than somebody else that may have been in that situation. Now you can give this testimony of how God took care of your body, your mind, and he was Jehovah Jireh. He provided for your family. So you were the right person for that to happen to, for God to have the story that he wanted to tell. Pastor Jay, horrific to lose your grandchild, but the way you handled it, a lesser person would not have been able to forgive publicly, even so that God could get the glory, so that somebody could see how this family, these two families that have had this horrific thing happen to them, show up and show grace to the person that caused so much pain. A lesser person would not have been able to do and say the things that you did. But because God has poured into you and he's shown you who he is and how he can still be there with you in those darkest moments, you are now an example for somebody else. Only God could have chosen you to do that, because somebody else wouldn't have been able to handle it. What I'm going through, a lesser person couldn't go through it and still talk about God as a loving God, as a merciful God, as a gracious God, as a God who has put a hedge of protection around me day in and day out. Weapons form every single day. Some of the most foolish things have come my way, but God has been there so that I can sit there and have lunch with a friend on yesterday that the enemy tried to tear us apart. And all we can say is, girl, I love you because I know you and I know who you are and I know how God works through you. And so when all that stuff came, she said, I just sat there and just kept changing the channel on the TV because I wasn't bothered, because I know that that's not my friend. So when God allows things to happen to us that a lesser person couldn't handle, it's because God knows that at the end of your story, Treve, you can look back and see where God's hand was in operation again and again and again, that he was protecting you, he was providing for you, that he had you in peak physical condition, that what you should have felt, you didn't even feel. Pastor Jay, again, I don't even want to imagine.
No.
But the fact that you can tell this story to us the way you did, only God in you, working through you. And so, yeah, those sometimes things have to happen to us,
Right.
to people that are listening to us, because only you are equipped to go through that situation. Only you, God has already empowered you for that situation and the circumstance to not overpower you, so that you can overcome, so that you can share your testimony, and that you can give God the glory.
And I was able to. I did a poem about it.
That's right.
So
That's it. That is it.
I think that, and just listening to our conversation, and we're talking about unforgiveness, the road from unforgiveness to forgiveness. But I think that it's amazing how it helps us to experience all these other things around it. The question I was going to ask at the beginning was what people can do, or how, I guess, where do people start when it comes to forgiveness? But those other things, love mainly, trust, having faith, having peace. I was thinking about what my word was because both of you gave what your word was on the last episode. My word is peace. I think just for me, even though I feel how I may feel on the inside, no one around me can see that for some reason. All I've been told, I was told not too long ago, I was asked, do you elevate? Like, you never elevate, do you? It's like, what does that mean? I never elevate. She's like, I mean, you never get excited or, I never see you just hyper or, excited. She was like, in things that have happened, they've been chaotic. Like chaos has been going on around you, but you just have this peace. One of the counselors told me that, and I went to her for help with something that was going on that was crazy. And she said, when you came to my office and you told me the situation, and even when I saw the situation, you still were just so calm somehow for some reason. And I was even told when I was asking for help, for assistance, I was calm. And so they didn't realize it was an emergency, even though I said someone needs to get here now. Because you were so calm about it. We couldn't it was hard for us to recognize that you really, really needed someone to come and help. One thing I've prayed for is for God's peace to surround me every day. And I think that not just in my office, but me as a person, I've been able to be a peace in the midst of the storm because of what I've asked for. And so I think that is my word. But I think in starting to or learning to forgive and knowing where to start, that it starts with those things. And sometimes they come as we start the process of forgiving because it is a process. It's not something that always can just be done immediately. But love has been the thing that has helped me to forgive. Peace has been the thing that has helped me to forgive. My faith in God has been the thing that has helped me to forgive. And I know that it's oftentimes that people that are harboring unforgiveness, they don't have a lot of those things in their life. So once again, just what would you say to those people? Where could they start? How could they get to a place where they truly can release and let go? Someone who doesn't have those things around them, or
I would say it starts with first forgiving yourself. A lot of times we can't forgive others because we haven't forgiven ourselves. We haven't forgiven ourselves for allowing ourselves to get into that bad relationship because they told me not to marry him and I did anyway. So you got to forgive yourself for that. You got to forgive yourself that you were stopped at the red light. There was nothing you could do. You couldn't move forward. You couldn't move past it. So forgive yourself for, why does this happen to me? Why did I leave at this time? If I would have waited, I could have, I would have missed the accident. Forgive yourself. So a lot of times we have to start with forgiving ourselves for even allowing those thoughts of what if or coulda, shoulda, woulda, if I would have done this instead. Forgive yourself. And then that's where you can then start to, maybe get a little bit of peace because now you've forgiven yourself for you didn't cause this. It's not your fault. Or if you did make a choice, even in the midst of that choice, God is still there. And so forgive yourself. And then that starts to open up the doors for having more peace and having more joy. And then you can start to love that person. And then in seeing the abilities, then you can get to a place of forgiveness. But for me, it starts with yourself, forgiving yourself. And a lot of times we beat up ourselves just as much as we want to beat up that other person.
that's true.
That's true. I agree. And I think, I think we've said it over and over. We do have to realize that it's a choice. It is a mindset and it is a walk of faith. It is a faith walk. But I love that the way to me that you ended it
Yeah, you
with that,
did.
that another person wouldn't have been able to handle it. And things happen to us when we feel like things are going good. and it becomes, we know that the greatest growth comes in the midst of chaos. We grow the most in chaos. We really see ourselves. We really see our growth. We look back and say, man, look at what I went through. Look at what God has done through me. So we grow our most through chaos. And so we learn to look at it, as the scripture says, we count it all joy when we fall into diverse temptations, and we know that God is working things in our lives through our tests. So we have to look at the issues of life in a more mature way, right? It's really becomes that, because immaturity only looks at me. Maturity begins to look around and and look at other circumstances and brings other things into the bar, not just me, right? That's childlike faith.
Right.
But as we mature, we begin to look at situations differently, and so I really don't have anything else to say about forgiveness. But I do have one thing. You blew me away, because last Wednesday I was with a young lady who was sharing your exact testimony. That she was sitting in the car, she got hit in the back, she had all of these pains, but her story moved into, she ended up getting addicted to the pain meds. And the cycle that she went through with her family, with her husband and her kids, trying to get off of the drugs, and just recently. So when you said that, I was like, oh my God, I just heard this story. And so I was waiting for you to go there, and I'm like, okay, no, it wasn't you. So it was another step to that story, that the plot that was that was planned against you, that you didn't even
And I
walk
refused
through.
to take the pain
And
pills.
that's something. And she just, this was Wednesday. So 1 week ago today, I just heard your testimony with another part of the story before God brought deliverance.
So still, it could have been worse, because I wouldn't take them. One thing that, while you were talking, that came to mind was something that, actually something I heard at work, and I've thought about it often, that most of the time we don't do anything until after something happens. I don't remember the word that he used, but the word that came to mind in place of that is that prayer helps to prevent things, but most of the times we don't pray until after something happens, or when we get in a mood or get in a place. Prayer helps with forgiving. Communicating and having a conversation with God helps with forgiving. But the Bible does tell us to pray without cease. So even if it is those just conversations that we're having with God, constant communication with him, is what helps us to be in a place where we're filled with and surrounded by love and peace and joy and all of those things, and can have faith in the midst of storm, regardless of what's going on around us. Internally having that, and affecting those around us and on the outside of all of that. But prayer is essential. It really and truly is. So
Amen. So I would say, to wrap it all up, we have a choice when it comes to forgiveness. You have a choice, but through love and grace and peace, prayerfully you'll make the right one. So let's end our episode on today on that note of a reminder for our listeners: you have a choice. Forgiveness is a choice.
amen.
If you're inspired by the word, share it with your family and your friends and even your enemies. And if you would like to make Jesus your Lord and Savior, or if you're just wanting prayer, you can reach out to us at wisewomenhtx@outlook.com. We want to thank everyone for listening in today, and please join us next time on Wise Women.